An African girl cried and pointed at the hatch. "My brother is down there." An Arab executive opened it and froze. He wasn't supposed to be there. Billionaire construction magnate Omar al-Mansouri had flown to West Africa for a land deal. Something quick, clean, profitable. But on that sweltering afternoon, as his convoy crawled through a rural village ravaged by poverty and silence, a little girl in torn clothes ran into the road, sobbing, screaming, and pointing to an old, rusted hatch in the ground. With wide, desperate eyes, she cried out, "My brother is down there!" No one else stopped, but Omar did. What he found when he opened that hatch froze every drop of blood in his body and changed the course of his life forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more powerful and inspiring stories like this one directly to you. Now, brace yourself. What started as a business trip will turn into a rescue mission, a crisis of conscience, and a journey of redemption that will shake Omar to his core. The sun bore down on the red earth of the village as Omar al-Mansouri wiped sweat from his brow. His beige linen suit, tailored in Milan, clung uncomfortably to his skin. Around him, the convoy of black SUVs stirred dust into the air as they slowed to a crawl. This wasn't supposed to be part of the itinerary. They were taking a detour through a rural zone due to a washed-out bridge. Omar didn't complain. He rarely did. He had built empires by staying calm, controlled, and distant. That's what made him a titan. But the silence of this village, it was wrong. Children should have been playing. Women should have been cooking. Men should have been fixing roofs or loading goods. Instead, there was stillness, not peaceful, hollow, ominous. He adjusted his sunglasses and stared out the window, noticing one lone figure running toward them. A girl, no older than 7, thin, barefoot. Her dress was stained, frayed, and hanging loosely on her bony shoulders. Suddenly, she ran straight into the path of the convoy. "Stop the car!" Omar barked. The lead vehicle hit the brakes just in time. Omar stepped out, dust puffing around his handmade shoes. The girl collapsed at his feet, sobbing uncontrollably. His bodyguards tensed, unsure of what to do. She gripped his pant leg. "Help! Please! My brother!" "He's down there," she said in broken English, pointing behind her to a mound of packed earth and rusted metal, what looked like a sealed bunker or an old storm cellar. "Where's your mother?" Omar asked, crouching slowly. She shook her head violently. "Gone. Please, please, he won't come out." One of the guards stepped forward. "Sir, we shouldn't waste time. This could be a setup." Omar didn't reply. He simply walked past them. He approached the hatch, noticing the padlock was broken. The air around it was foul, metallic. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He hesitated only for a moment before grasping the rusted handle and pulling. It creaked open with a screech that echoed across the village. The stench hit him first. Rot, mold, something deeper, human. He called out in Arabic, then in English. "Hello." No answer. He turned back to the girl. "How long has he been down there?" She just stared. Her eyes were wide, haunted. Omar pulled out his phone, switched on the flashlight, and leaned in. The hatch revealed a steep, narrow descent, a crude ladder welded into a concrete shaft. Carefully, he climbed down. The light trembled in his hand. The further he descended, the colder it felt. Not from temperature, but from something else. Something primal. When his feet touched the dirt floor, he swept the light around and froze. A boy, maybe 5 years old, curled in a corner, shirtless, skin covered in grime and bruises, eyes closed. Omar's breath caught in his throat. The boy wasn't moving. He rushed forward, heart pounding, and touched the child's wrist. A pulse. Weak, but there. The boy stirred and moaned faintly, recoiling instinctively. Omar's voice trembled. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe now." The child whimpered, but didn't speak. He looked up. The girl was peering down, her hands clutched in silent hope. Omar turned back to the boy and whispered, "I've got you." He scooped the frail body into his arms and climbed back up slowly, each step heavier than the last. When he emerged, dust and light blinded him briefly. But the girl rushed forward, sobbing in relief as she saw her brother in his arms. The boy weakly opened his eyes. Their gazes met, and for the first time in years, Omar felt something crack inside him. It wasn't just pity. It was something deeper, familiar. He handed the boy to the medics in his team, ignoring his assistant's protests and the guards' worried glances. "Find out what happened," he ordered, "and I want him and his sister with me." One of the bodyguards protested. "Sir, with all due respect—" Omar cut him off sharply. "I said with me." As the girl clung to his leg once more, Omar looked back at the hatch. Whatever he had stumbled into, it wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning. The private jet sliced through the West African skies like a blade of silence. Inside, Omar sat still, staring at the two children wrapped in clean, oversized blankets across from him. They were fast asleep now, exhausted, fragile, huddled close on the cream leather seat. The boy's breathing was shallow, but steady. The girl hadn't let go of her brother's hand since they took off. Omar had cancelled all his meetings, cancelled the land deal, told his advisors nothing except that the trip had changed, that he was returning to Dubai with passengers who had no passports, no names in the system, and no one waiting for them. Not one of them dared question him twice. But his silence wasn't calm. He was unraveling. Not visibly. Not in the way other men would. He didn't cry. He didn't pace. He simply sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, eyes locked on those children, as if trying to rewind the past and see the moment that life failed them. His assistant, Kareem, finally broke the silence. "Sir, we still don't know who locked him in that cellar, or why." "I know," Omar murmured. "That's the problem." He leaned back. The hum of the engines filled the space, but it couldn't drown out the memory of the hatch opening, of that boy's skin, ghostly pale, covered in old welts. The village had vanished in silence once they left. No one there had spoken to his team. Not a soul had offered any answers. It was as if the children had never existed, or were never meant to. Omar closed his eyes and thought of his own childhood. He'd grown up in the Sharjah slums, long before the towers, before the fame. His father had abandoned the family. His mother had cleaned hotel bathrooms and cooked for construction crews. Omar knew hunger. He knew the sound of his mother crying behind a closed door when she thought her son was asleep. He knew what it meant to be invisible. That was why he built empires, why he clawed his way up through oil and real estate, why he became the youngest CEO in the UAE before the age of 30. He never wanted to feel powerless again. But now, he'd met someone even smaller than he once was. A child with no voice, no name, and it shattered him. Hours later, they arrived at his compound on the edge of the Dubai desert, a sprawling modern fortress of sand-colored stone and glass, surrounded by towering palms and guarded by silence. The children were placed in a guest villa where a private doctor had already been waiting. "She's malnourished, but alert," the doctor reported quietly. "The boy is in worse shape. He has signs of prolonged trauma and dehydration. But with time, they'll recover." Omar nodded once. He stood outside their villa for a long time that night, hands in his pockets, the wind of the desert brushing through his thob. The sand stretched endlessly in all directions, golden, pure, and ancient. He thought of the hatch again, the screaming, the silence afterward, and the girl's voice. He won't come out. He had no answers yet, but he made a decision. "I want them to stay here," he told Kareem, "until we find out who they are, and why no one was looking for them." "Sir," Kareem hesitated, "there will be questions, legal risks, the press." Omar turned, eyes sharp. "I'm not interested in press. I'm interested in justice." The next morning he returned to the villa with something in his hands, a simple box with a toy car and a small cloth doll, things he never would have imagined holding in his life. When he knocked gently on the open door, the girl looked up from her bed. Her brother was still asleep beside her. Omar sat on the floor, placing the box in front of her without a word. She stared at it, then at him. Her eyes narrowed with mistrust. "You don't have to talk," he said gently. "Not yet." He paused. "But if you tell me your name, I'll make sure no one hurts you ever again." She hesitated, looked down, then whispered, "Amara." Omar felt a lump rise in his throat. "Amara," he repeated. "That's a strong name." He waited, heart thudding. She looked toward her brother, then back at Omar. "His name is Malik." Omar smiled faintly, despite himself. For the first time, he knew who they were, but he still had no idea who they had come from, or what was coming next. The sun rose hot and merciless over Dubai, casting long shadows across the Al-Mansouri compound. Inside the villa, the children were adjusting slowly. Malik remained silent, but he no longer flinched at Omar's presence. Amara had started to speak in short bursts, always about Malik, never herself. But while the children healed, Omar had become restless. He couldn't stop seeing that hatch, that smell, that look in Amara's eyes. He had called in favors, quietly. He told his cybersecurity chief to find everything they could about the village. No official name, no real government presence. A forgotten pocket of land used by foreign contractors and mining firms. Omar knew what that meant. People passing through, doing damage, and vanishing. That morning, as he sipped thick black Arabic coffee on his terrace, Karim approached with a tablet in hand and a face that was pale beneath his usual composure. "We found something." Omar stood instantly. "Show me." Karim handed him the screen. A video, grainy, dated 6 months ago. It was taken from a cell phone, likely leaked on the dark web. It showed a group of men, Western accents, laughing near the hatch. One held a flashlight. Another tossed something inside. A child's scream echoed faintly. The men laughed louder. "They called it the pit," Karim said. "Some kind of punishment or test. The locals were paid to stay quiet. Some were threatened. Others were complicit." Omar didn't speak. He just watched the footage until the screen went dark. Karim added quietly, "They're mercenaries, connected to a mining subcontractor your cousin's firm invested in last year." A pulse of anger shot through Omar's chest. "Which cousin?" "Adil." Omar clenched his jaw. "Of course. Adil al-Mansouri, charming, ruthless, and reckless, had always believed rules were for the poor. Their paths had diverged years ago, but their names remained tied in contracts, land deals, and politics. I want his contracts frozen, all of them. Use my authority on the board." "That will draw attention," Karim warned. "I hope it does," Omar said flatly. "Let them look. Let them ask questions." But part of him knew this was deeper than Adil. Those children weren't just victims of cruelty. They were caught in the machinery of profit. Later that day, Omar returned to the villa. He found Amara sitting by the window, drawing in a small sketchbook one of the staff had given her. It was a rough drawing. A square, a hatch, a tiny stick figure inside. Malik. She looked up and handed it to him. "That's where he was," she said softly. Omar nodded. "I remember." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "They locked me out, said he wasn't worth saving." Omar swallowed hard. "Who said that?" She looked away. "Men with helmets, white skin, and one man, darker, with a gold watch. He said to leave him." Omar froze. A gold watch. Adil wore one, always. A custom Rolex with a green face. He crouched to her level, trying not to shake. "Did this man say his name?" Amara hesitated, then whispered, "He said he was the boss." Omar stood. His vision narrowed. He had confirmation now. The monster had a name, and that name was family. That night, Omar called Adil, not from his office, not through lawyers. He dialed directly, an old number, rarely used. Adil answered with his usual bravado. "Omar, long time. Finally remembered your bloodline?" "I want to meet," Omar said calmly. "Face to face." "Why the sudden warmth?" "Because I need to look you in the eyes when I ask about the children you left to die." Silence. Then a low chuckle. "I don't know what you think you've found," Adil said, voice darker now. "But don't forget, you and I are made from the same stone." "No," Omar said. "I dug my way out of the dirt. You chose to bury others in it." He hung up. Karim was waiting just outside the door. "Are we escalating?" "We already have," Omar said. "Get everything ready. I'm going back there." "To the village?" "To the source." Because rescuing the children wasn't enough. He had to burn the pit to the ground. Omar had flown to 1,000 places in his life. Capitals, deserts, conflict zones, and paradises. But nothing felt like this. As the helicopter dipped low over the jungle-scarred land, Omar stared out in silence. The closer they got to the village, the harder his heart pounded. It had been just 10 days since he found Amara and Malik. 10 days since he pulled a boy from a hole in the earth. Now he was returning not as a businessman, but as a storm. Next to him, Karim reviewed files in a tablet, his voice steady over the roar of the blades. "We've tracked 2 names from the video. One is an American ex-military contractor. The other, French, linked to illegal mining ops. Both fled. But the village still has ties to Adil's firm. Quiet ones. Paper trails buried under shell companies." Omar nodded once, eyes fixed forward. They landed just beyond the ridge. No crowd came to greet them this time. No children in the road. Just the same silence, brittle and suffocating. He stepped out alone, boots crunching on dry dirt. The air was heavy with heat and old secrets. Locals peered from windows but said nothing. The hatch was still there, still open. He stared at it for a long moment, then turned toward a house built from patched concrete and rusted tin. The village chief's residence, according to Karim's intel. Omar didn't knock. He pushed the door open and entered. Inside, a thin man with sunken eyes and cracked hands sat on a mat. Behind him, a young boy peeked through a curtain, then vanished. The chief didn't stand, didn't speak. Omar took a breath. "Do you know who I am?" A long pause, then a whisper. "You're the brother who saw." Omar stepped closer. "I'm the one who didn't look away." The chief closed his eyes. "You weren't supposed to find them." "Why were they down there?" "They were born to a local girl. She died. Foreigners left them behind. No papers, no names, no worth. Some say the boy was sick, cursed. He's not cursed. He's 5. The chief's voice cracked. Men with money said not to interfere. They paid, and when they pay, we disappear. Omar's fists clenched. He turned and walked out. Behind him, the chief called softly, "What will you do, Sheikh?" Omar didn't answer, because he wasn't sure yet. At the hatch, he stood over the darkness again. This time, he dropped a flare inside. Its red glow lit up the chamber below. No bodies, no screams, just an empty echo. But echoes mattered. They lingered. Karim caught up to him with a folder. "We have everything we need to build a case. Names, transactions, wire transfers from Adil's offshore accounts. It's enough to ruin him." "Ruin isn't enough," Omar murmured. "I want it exposed." "You mean public?" Omar looked back at the hatch. "He made a child into a secret. I'll make the secret into fire." By dusk, they were back at the makeshift airstrip. Omar made one final call to a journalist, not a friendly one, not someone who owed him anything. Her name was Amal Rashid, an investigative reporter who had once written a brutal exposé about corruption in Gulf infrastructure projects. Omar had publicly condemned her. Privately, he had respected every word. When she answered, there was a pause. "Why are you calling me?" "Because I have a story," Omar said. "And you're the only one I trust to tell it without mercy." She was quiet. "This isn't a trap." "No, it's justice." "What's the story?" "A hatch, a child, a name you know." "Whose?" "Adil al-Mansuri." Another pause. Then, "I'll be on the next flight." Omar ended the call. In the fading light, he looked toward the village one last time. The wind swept through the trees. Somewhere, a dog barked, a door creaked, and below it all, silence. But not for long, because the truth was coming, and this time it would speak for those who couldn't. The story dropped at dawn. It opened with a still image, the rusted hatch in the middle of dry, cracked soil, a blood-red flare glowing from its depths. Below the image, bold letters spelled out, "The Pit of Silence, Children Abandoned by Power." Amal Rashid's article hit every major news outlet in under an hour. Her voice, unrelenting and razor-sharp, laid bare the entire truth. Names, dates, wire transfers, company affiliations, witness statements from terrified villagers, testimonies from Omar's security team, even leaked footage from the day Omar opened the hatch. She didn't soften the language. She didn't use euphemisms. She called it what it was, human abandonment for corporate gain. And at the center of it all, Adil al-Mansuri. The public reaction was instant. Twitter flooded with hashtags, #ThePit, justice, for Amara had burned the hatch. Within hours, Adil's face, once featured in Forbes and Esquire, was being torn apart in headlines worldwide. From billionaire to butcher, the family shame of Dubai's elite. How children were buried alive for profit. Omar watched the chaos unfold from his office window, standing with his back to the city skyline. He hadn't spoken since the article dropped. Karim entered quietly. "It's happening," he said. "Adil's assets are frozen in the Emirates and Switzerland. The board at Al-Mansuri Developments has called for an emergency vote to remove him." Omar didn't react. He was thinking about Amara, who had spent the night drawing again. This time not a pit, but a desert palace with sun and flowers. And Malik, who had finally laughed, just once, at a balloon the staff gave him. Karim placed a folder on the table. "Interpol has taken interest. The 2 mercenaries have gone off-grid, but the warrants are in place. And the village? There's now a full investigation by international NGOs. They want to rebuild, provide protection." Still, Omar said nothing. Karim hesitated. "You did what no one else would have done." Omar finally turned. "No. I did what I should have done years ago." Karim blinked. "You didn't know." Omar's voice darkened. "That's the problem. I could have known. I never looked." He crossed the room and picked up a photo, an old one. His mother, standing in the dirt alley outside their one-room home in Sharjah. Omar, no older than Malik, barefoot, hungry, clinging to her dress. "I became a king," he said softly, "but forgot I was once a child in the dark, too." He placed the photo down. Not anymore. Later that evening, a press conference was arranged. Omar stood at the podium, cameras flashing from every direction. The world expected silence, a legal statement, a cold denial, a controlled damage report. But Omar leaned forward, raw and unguarded. I will not speak as a CEO today, not as a shareholder, not even as a member of the al-Mansouri family. I speak as the man who opened a hatch and saw what greed does when we stop caring. He paused. There were 2 children in that hole, Amara and Malik, left to die because someone richer decided they were less than human. That someone shares my blood, and I do not ask forgiveness for what I did next. I exposed him. Gasps rippled through the audience. I know many of you wonder why now. Why not protect the family, the brand? Because there is no brand, no name, no empire worth a single child's life. And if I must lose everything to say that aloud, so be it. He stepped back. No further questions. That night, Amara sat on the floor of the villa's garden, picking petals from a flower and humming a soft tune. Omar watched from a distance, arms crossed, heart heavier than ever, but also lighter than it had been in years. She looked up and smiled faintly. Is it over now? She asked. He crouched beside her. Not over, he said, but it's changing. Because of you. She nodded. I just wanted someone to hear me. He looked out at the city, golden towers glowing in the night. They did, he whispered. And now they won't forget. The world didn't forget. In the weeks that followed Omar's public declaration, the fallout continued like a slow-burning fire. Adil al-Mansouri was arrested at a private airstrip in Morocco while attempting to flee to the Seychelles. His face, once plastered on billboards for luxury real estate, now filled TV screens in handcuffs. He tried to deny everything, claimed a smear campaign, but the evidence was airtight. Omar had made sure of that. The al-Mansouri board stripped Adil of all titles and holdings. International courts began proceedings. NGOs moved into the village with humanitarian aid. Journalists called it the Hatch Revolution. But for Omar, it wasn't a victory. It was a responsibility. Each day he visited the children. Malik was regaining strength, walking more, even smiling now and then. He didn't speak often, but when he did, he whispered stories to Amara in their shared dialect. Amara translated bits and pieces for the caretakers. She had become fiercely protective of her brother. Omar saw himself in her, not in the brokenness, in the steel. He hired tutors, a private trauma specialist, a West African cook who prepared their regional dishes. Nothing was spared, yet Omar knew it wasn't enough, because the question still hung in the air like a ghost. What happens next? One afternoon, as he walked through the garden of the guest villa, he found Amara sitting under the olive tree, barefoot, legs crossed, drawing again. This time, it was a picture of a house. But not just any house. It was the villa. In the drawing, there were 3 figures, a girl, a boy, and Omar, in his thawb, holding their hands. He crouched beside her, surprised. "You drew this?" She nodded without looking up. He studied it carefully. "Who's that in the middle?" "You," she said simply. Then, hesitating, "Do we have to leave?" Omar froze. He had been thinking of it, offering to sponsor their relocation, perhaps arrange a new home in Senegal or Ghana, near where they were born. But her voice, soft, unsure, told him something else. They didn't just want safety. They wanted him. He sat down beside her. "You don't have to leave unless you want to," he said carefully. "But I don't want to make choices for you. You've had too many taken already." Amara looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Mama used to say our names were special." He raised his eyebrows. "Really?" She nodded. "She said Amara means grace. Malik means king. She said one day we'd find someone who'd treat us like both." Omar swallowed the lump in his throat. She pointed at the drawing. "Is that you?" He didn't answer right away, but in his silence something shifted. Later that night, in the quiet of his study, Omar sat at his desk and took out a blank sheet of paper. Slowly, he began to write, not a business proposal, not a memo, but something he hadn't written in decades. A petition for guardianship. The legal process was complex, especially with the children's undocumented status. But Omar spared no resource. Immigration lawyers, family court specialists, psychological assessments, everything required to prove that his intentions were not just generous, but permanent. 3 weeks later, a judge handed down the ruling. He was now their legal guardian. When he returned home that night, Karim handed him a small package. A courier delivered this from the court. Inside was a new identification card for Malik, a passport, a certificate of guardianship, all bearing one name, Malik al-Mansouri, and beside it, another, Amara al-Mansouri. Omar sat down slowly, staring at the names. It was official now. They weren't someone else's responsibility. They were his. The next morning, he entered the villa quietly. Amara was brushing Malik's hair. She turned, eyes wide. Omar knelt and held out the 2 documents. "These are yours now." She took them, frowning. "What is it?" "Your names," he said softly. "And your future." She opened hers. Malik peeked at his. "Does this mean we're like you now?" she asked. Omar smiled. No, it means I'm like you now. She blinked, confused. Because you saved me, he said. And he meant it. Not just from guilt, from forgetting who he really was. Years later, Malik stood on stage, wearing a navy blue graduation robe. He was tall now, strong, confident. Amara sat in the front row, her hand clutching Omar's. She was already in university herself, a fierce mind, a radiant heart. When Malik's name was called, Malik al-Mansuri, the entire hall erupted in applause.